I really don't, and I cannot say with any certainty today whether President Trump views India as something which is a subordinate nation to be brought into an alliance with the United States or as an equal nation with which it is to be aligned. I'm not even sure, Nitin, whether President Trump has an India strategy and whether India is simply just one of the pawns on a chessboard to be sacrificed when they have a larger game to play.
Hello and welcome. I'm Nitin Gokhale. You're on StratNews Global. You're on StratNews Global. And our program, The Gist, today we feature former Foreign Secretary and diplomat Ambassador Vijay Gokhale. The world as we see today, as all of us are aware, is in a churn that is unprecedented in many ways. Of course, every era has some crisis or the other. But let me get him first to comment on how does he see it. Vijay, thank you for joining us from Pune. But my first question to you is, are we witnessing the collapse of the old world order and the new one is yet to set in? And how do you see this in between time, or is it not the correct prognosis really?
Yeah, thank you, Nitin, for having me on your show. The world order was already fragmenting before Trump took office. The permanent members of the UN Security Council, for instance, who were tasked with keeping global peace, had all illegitimately used military force in the past 20 years. The United States in Iraq, the West in general in Syria and Libya, Russia in Ukraine and Georgia, and China, as we know, in our neighborhood. Similarly, even the Bretton Woods institutions, which built the global economic framework together with the WTO, was showing signs of stress already because they were not willing to accommodate emerging economies like China and India and Brazil. And then, of course, technology was changing the world. Countries could leapfrog and catch up easier. And all this was, in any case, leading to a fragmentation before President Trump took office, even the first time around. What we can say is that this disintegration has actually accelerated after President Trump took office. And this is partly due to his actions, but also partly due to other actions. So, in his case, of course, the whole America First approach and the treatment of friend and foe alike based on America's self interest has, in a sense, of course, disintegrated the American built world order faster than it might otherwise have happened. But we have also to acknowledge that China's spectacular rise and the fact that it is a true competitor to the United States, not a hollow competitor like the Soviet Union, has also accelerated that disintegration. Russia's re-emergence as a significant player has also done that. And alternative mechanisms that have evolved in the last 20 years, such as the G20, BRICS, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the New Development Bank, RCEP, and so on, have ensured that these new institutions are not totally dominated by the West. So I would say that it is a collective set of developments which have accelerated the disintegration. Of course, whether this fragmentation can be reversed or whether the old order is going to completely collapse is something difficult to say at this stage, Nitin. I think that remains to be determined.
Yeah, that's the question. So till that is determined, then we have to look at what is going to be the immediate future. Therefore, we see nations hedging. For instance, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in China just last week or earlier this week actually was a display of anti-West kind of a gathering. So, how does that play out as far as Asia and India is concerned?
What is clear is that the old arrangement is not going to continue because Trump 2.0 has done too much damage to the US brand globally. And of course, in the short term, because the United States is still the dominant power, some countries are making tactical adjustments, such as Japan, South Korea, the European Union. But there will be long term separation even so far as these countries are concerned. On the question of hedging, however, I think we need to take a nuanced view, Nitin. Which countries are hedging? China and Russia certainly are not hedging. Their strategic partnership is strengthened and they are looking at a broader Eurasian compact. Now, of course, Trump or some of Trump's associates may believe that they can do a reverse Kissinger, but I don't think that's likely. Nor are the countries of Eastern and Central Europe hedging. They have a deep seated fear of Russia and they believe that the United States is critical for their protection. In fact, they are
Sure.
demanding that the more prosperous Western Europe, France, Germany, Britain, that they should actually spend more to protect Eastern Europe. So they're not hedging either. The global south, to my mind, is also not hedging, Nitin. As they look at what Trump is doing to the emerging economies, China is beginning to look more and more attractive to them. It's not only a source of an alternative source of capital and technology, there are less political strings attached to that assistance which China gives as compared to what President Trump is doing to the rest of the world. So I'd say a small group of middle powers and emerging economies are hedging. Japan, India, Indonesia, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. These are aspiring poles, countries which believe that they will become poles in the future. They want to retain elements of the old order, but they want to get a bigger share of the pie. And interestingly, you will see that these middle powers which are hedging are also becoming prime targets for Chinese influence building. China is reaching out to France, to Germany, to India, to Indonesia, because it realizes that this may be the time for them to swing some of these hedging states to their direction. So, at the end of it, all I'd say, hedging strategy is being followed by a few middle powers, but not necessarily by the rest of the world.
No, that's absolutely bang on as far as observation is concerned, and very very aptly put. But in case these middle powers have to continue the policy of hedging, then what is the path for India? Because India, in a way, is caught in a cleft stick. I mean, this the relationship with the United States has deteriorated so suddenly that even if there is some kind of a repair, some kind of a going back on the way the slide has happened, I think the distrust will remain. And with China, you can't go the whole hog, and there is always a political and domestic consequence with China if India does that. So, what is India's way out then? How does India navigate this churn that is currently happening?
Well, I have a point of view. Of course, it is government's policy, prerogative to make policy, but I think that my point of view is something that I would like to share. I think, first of all,
Sure.
Nitin, we have to get real. We have bought the idea that the world is multipolar a little too literally. We are in a multilateral world where just two countries alone cannot decide. But we are not in a multipolar world. We are in a multilateral world with strong bipolar features. And so long as the United States and China remain much, much bigger than everybody else economically, militarily, and technologically, we are going to remain in a multilateral world with strong bipolar features. And we need to recognize that reality, much as we would aspire to a multipolar world. Therefore, we have to craft a foreign policy which is based on our constraints and capabilities, not on projections. By all means, we should aspire to a $10 trillion economy or to being the second largest economy in the world. But we cannot plan for tomorrow on that basis alone. We need to factor in the fact that we are only a $4 trillion economy and that our technological capability lags significantly behind the Americans and the Chinese. And therefore, I think our focus has to be on the Indo Pacific, as the Prime Minister has repeatedly said, beginning with his speech at the Shangri La Dialogue. And the three concentric circles are, of course, The innermost circle is our immediate neighborhood and the neighborhood first policy, including dealing with all governments of the day. That includes governments like Bangladesh, which may not be friendly towards India, but which is a neighbor we have to deal with. The second concentric circle is the near abroad, as the Russians coined that term, and that is from the Gulf, including Iran in the west, to ASEAN in the east, because this is our karma bhumi in some sense. And the largest concentric circle is, of course, the Indo Pacific, the arc from Northern America to Eastern Africa. I think really this is the area we have to focus on. And we have to do a couple of things. We have to build economic leverages, which means we have to review, if required, our whole approach to RCEP. I have always believed that not joining RCEP was a strategic blunder. Had we been members of RCEP, perhaps we would have been in a better position today to negotiate with the United States. Similarly, had we done the free trade agreement with Europe earlier, we might have been in a better position. We need to get these two things done now. We also need to build our technological capability. And I think we have a huge opportunity, Nitin. 100,000 Indian citizens on an H-1B visa are not sure whether they are going to have a job tomorrow. This is the time we reach out to that category of people actively and say, come back to India, there are jobs for you. This is not the government's task alone, it is the task of the Indian companies and private sector as well. But I can assure you of one thing, Nitin. China, Japan, Germany, Singapore, and so on will be reaching out to these 100,000 Indians who have a question mark on their minds and recruiting them already. And we should be doing this as a matter of national policy. Otherwise, they will go to Singapore, they will go to China, they will go to Germany, and they will help those economies. And lastly, of course, our military capabilities have to be built. You're a better judge of that than me. I think Operation Sindoor was a great success, but there were also some learnings from it. We need to look at new technologies, at new doctrines, and at military reform. So I think we need to do all these things if India is to navigate as a middle power in what certainly is an upward trajectory to becoming a great power.
Oh, in fact, absolutely, well put. Because these three or four things, military leverage, economic leverage is required. But in the neighborhood, India has a big contest on hand. China is already, has already made inroads into the neighborhood, which is creating its own challenges for India, of course. And like you mentioned, Bangladesh, for instance, let's take that example. I think India has now come round to think on accept that whichever government comes after a legitimate election that probably happens in February, it is willing to work with it, which probably wasn't the case when Sheikh Hasina was ousted, and it came as a surprise. But you're right, absolutely, and very very significant point that you mentioned about the H-1B visa holders, because we made if we repeat the mistake of 1991, when we didn't go to the scientists in the USSR or the former Soviet Union and didn't utilize their services. Everybody else did it. We should not be doing that to our own people, I suppose. But let me come to a more specific point, which also is your area of uh, expertise and specialization: the India-China relationship. How do you see that right now?
So I'd say there's a partial normalization on the boundary because we have disengaged, but we have not de escalated. So armed coexistence will continue for a few more years at least, and that has been my contention right since the Galwan incident. I have also always maintained that the old framework for the relationship has broken down. We are in the early days of crafting a new framework for that relationship. The resumption of political dialogue is a tactical necessity, and I'm glad that that has begun. But we have also got to admit that tangible progress is limited. After all, we have started the yatra, we have resumed flights, we have liberalized the visa regime to some extent. China has said it will lift some of the export controls, but this is all relatively limited progress. The major issues that confront both sides are yet to be tackled. That includes a very, very significant trade deficit. It includes the situation on the boundary, both in terms of peace and tranquility and settling the boundary. It involves China's assistance to Pakistan during the recent conflict, and so on and so forth. Once we make progress there, or if we make progress there, then I think some sort of strategic rebalancing becomes a possibility. But so far, I think the progress is limited. The days are too early. It's too early in the day to say that relations have been fully normalized, and I think the road is hard and long ahead of us. I'm of course confident, and I have always been confident that both governments are mature enough to negotiate that road, but it will still require compromise and conciliatory approach on both sides.
That indeed is the case. I am aware, and also the boundary issue continues to cast a shadow on the relationship. So this some new arrangements that have been spoken about of the two sectors, middle and eastern sector, getting a new arrangement of generals speaking to each other, the corps commander level kind of a discussion. Those are basically tactical confidence building measures, would you say, or they would lead to something more tangible? Because you've written about the mechanism that was adopted post Galwan on negotiating the disengagement and probably going forward the de-escalation. I'm asking you that because there is some talk about the early harvest thing, which is again goes back to the historical fact that China has been demanding piecemeal solutions. India has said no, but what is the sort of confusion there in many people's mind, like mine, because we still don't know which way it is going, but you may be able to shed some light.
Well, so far as the de-escalation measures are concerned and the general level mechanism that is being set up to ensure that that peace and tranquility on the boundary are maintained, if these two function as they should, I think there will be significant new steps in maintaining peace in the line of actual control. However, with de-escalation, we need to be cautious because we are at a geographical, topographical, and meteorological disadvantage. Both weather and topography are of disadvantage to us. Therefore, disengagement cannot simply be equal. It has to be equal and mutual security because they are on a flat land and we are on a descending slope. But if that can be tackled, and I have no doubt that that is certainly one of the considerations that the government will put in front when it moves forward, it could be a positive step. On the early harvest issue, of course, that is yet another attempt or an initiative to settle the boundary issue and not the line of actual control issue. We've been trying that. India has been doing that repeatedly, coming up with initiatives in 1988, in 2003, and so on. For reasons we are well aware of, that is China's unwillingness to countenance any relaxation in its position, we have not been able to move forward. Uh, so far, government has not shared details of what it means by early harvest. It has not even shared the sectors that it intends to cover. We are only speculating that it is Sikkim and the middle sector. Of course, government is free to take whatever decision is in the national interest. But my only concern here is that we need to be consistent with the agreement we signed in 2005, that it has to be a package settlement involving all sectors of the India-China boundary, and that the same principles have to apply across the board. So there are a number of theoretical or hypothetical issues I can raise, but unless government first makes it clear as to what they intend with the doing with the early harvest, it's difficult to speculate.
True. No, no, I don't want you to speculate because we still don't know. One thing, of course, what I've heard about the de-escalation is that both sides have agreed that the de-escalation should be measured by the time you take to reach the LAC rather than the distance. That is what I think has been agreed upon, and I believe the Chinese have now conceded that this needs to be the principle on which this de-escalation should take place. But let's see how it goes, because it's too early. Again, disengagement certainly has happened, de-escalation has not. Like, both of us agree on that. But one final question on the India-U.S. Relationship: is the rupture so damaging that it might take a long time to repair, or is it something that can be overcome by both bureaucracies on both sides?
Well, there's no doubt a rupture has happened. We have past examples, and I can give you one example of each where the rupture was repaired quickly and the rupture took a long time to repair. So,
Mhm.
1971 is the classic case when the rupture with United States took almost 20 years before it could be repaired. We went through all the 1970s and much of the 1980s as estranged nations and as estranged democracies, the title of a book written by an American. On the other hand, the 1998 nuclear tests are a classic case where a rupture with the United States was not only repaired within a matter of 2 years, but we then took it forward into a strategic partnership. Now, what
Right.
is the difference between the two? The difference was the attitude of the United States towards accepting that India was never going to be an ally in the classic sense, but that India was important enough for them to invest in so that we were aligned to them. When in the Cold War, that was not possible. They needed allies against the Soviet Union.
Sure.
Post the Cold War, they did not need an ally, and they understood India's worth as a nuclear power and aligned with us. I really don't, and I cannot say with any certainty today whether President Trump views India as something which is a subordinate nation to be brought into an alliance with the United States or as an equal nation with which it is to be aligned. I'm not even sure, Nitin, whether President Trump has an India strategy and whether India is simply just one of the pawns on a chessboard to be sacrificed when they have a larger game to play. So at this stage, it's very difficult to say whether we are going to go the 1971 way or the 1998 way. But what I think is true is that there are enduring interests and values which converge, which are not congruent, but which converge. So we might be able to live out the 3.5 years and come back to the normal track later. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic, but I don't think I'm wildly enthusiastic at this stage that the strategic partnership will be restored in a matter of months.
I think, again, very aptly put, because 3.5 years is a long time. I mean, as they say, a week is a long time in politics. 3.5 years may be a very
Yeah.
long time, but let's see how it goes. But thanks, Vijay, for the insights and all the informative take on how India should navigate the current turmoil and the turbulence that the world is facing. We'll come back to you with some more discussions when required. But for the time being, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So keep watching StratNews Global. We keep bringing these such interesting discussions for you, and of course, your feedback is important. So do comment and write. Subscribe to our channel if you already haven't, and of course, share this video. For the time being, it's goodbye.